Minus 40 degrees does not feel like cold. It feels like the air is actively trying to kill you. Exposed skin freezes in minutes. Lungs burn with every breath. Your body starts shutting down before you even realize what is happening. Ancient humans had no heating. No insulated walls, no emergency services, just open ice and a temperature that should have made human survival completely impossible. And yet they not only survived it, they figured out how to live in it permanently. What they did is something most people today would refuse to do even to save their own life. Here is something that most people do not know about the human body. It is a tropical machine. Humans evolved in the warm grasslands of Africa. The human body has almost no natural protection against extreme cold. No thick layer of insulating fat like a seal. No dense fur coat like a bear. No ability to hibernate or slow its own metabolism when temperatures drop. A bare human body in minus 40-degree temperatures begins losing heat faster than it can produce it almost immediately. Within 30 minutes of exposure, fine motor skills start failing. Fingers stop working properly. Within an hour, thinking becomes genuinely difficult as the brain starts receiving less blood flow. Within a few hours, without intervention, the body shuts down completely. This is the animal that decided to walk into Ice Age Siberia, into environments where winter temperatures regularly hit minus 40 and stayed there for months, where there was no warmth anywhere in any direction for hundreds of miles. And they survived. Not just barely. They thrived well enough to raise children, build communities, and passed their knowledge forward across thousands of generations. The first thing they had to solve was the most immediate problem: keeping the body warm enough to stay alive through a single night. And the solution they found was something that changed the entire direction of human history. Fire is the obvious answer, and fire mattered enormously. But fire has a problem that ancient humans discovered immediately. It only heats the side of you facing it. The moment you turn away from the flames, that side goes cold. The moment you step away to get more wood, all the warmth disappears instantly. Fire kept you alive sitting next to it. It did almost nothing for you anywhere else. What ancient humans needed was a way to carry warmth with them everywhere they went. And the solution they developed is something you are almost certainly wearing a version of right now: fitted clothing. Not just animal skins thrown over the shoulders. That had existed for a long time. What changed everything was the invention of the needle. Archaeologists have found bone needles at ancient sites going back over 40,000 years. Tiny, precise tools with a small hole bored through one end for thread made from animal sinew. These needles allowed ancient humans to cut animal hides into specific shapes and stitch them together into garments that fitted tightly against the body with no gaps for wind to enter. The difference between a draped animal skin and a properly fitted sewn garment is not small. A draped skin loses heat through every gap at the sides, the bottom, and around the arms. A sewn garment seals a layer of warm air directly against the skin and holds it there regardless of how much the person moves. Researchers who have studied ancient Arctic clothing found that traditional sewn garments made from animal hide provided insulation equivalent to modern high-performance winter gear. Not almost as good. Equivalent. Ancient humans were wearing technology that matched what modern engineering produces. They just built it from animals instead of synthetic materials. But clothing alone was not enough to survive minus 40, because at some point every person had to stop moving and sleep. And sleeping in minus 40 without the right shelter meant not waking up. Finding shelter in an Ice Age landscape was not simple. Caves existed, but they were scarce. A good dry cave in a useful location was rare and competed for by multiple groups. Most of the time, ancient humans could not count on finding one, so they built it instead. And what they built from is the part of this story that the thumbnail of this video shows directly. At a site in modern-day Ukraine called Mezerik, archaeologists uncovered the remains of structures built roughly 15,000 years ago. The landscape around the site had almost no timber and almost no stone. The people who built there used what was available in enormous quantities from hunting mammoth bones. They stacked the bones of dozens of mammoths into circular dome-shaped structures, jawbones layered on top of each other like bricks. Massive tusks arched overhead to form the roof structure. The bones of the legs and ribs interlocked to form walls. A single dwelling used the remains of as many as 15 separate mammoths. These were not quick shelters thrown up in desperation. Researchers studying the sites found evidence of careful planning and deliberate construction. The bones were selected for specific structural properties and placed in specific positions. These were engineered structures built by people who understood exactly what they were doing. Inside these structures, Animal hides were stretched across the inner walls to block wind coming through the gaps between bones. Floors were lined with layers of grass and plant material for insulation against the frozen ground. And fire burned at the center, with the heat trapped inside the enclosed space rather than disappearing into open air. A well-built mammoth bone shelter in -40 temperatures, with a fire burning inside and hides covering the walls, could maintain an interior temperature warm enough for human survival through the longest and coldest nights of an Ice Age winter. But staying warm through the night was only part of the problem. The other part arrived every single day when ancient humans had to leave that shelter and function in the cold. And this is where their survival methods became genuinely extraordinary. Here is something that the thumbnail of this video shows and that most people find genuinely difficult to accept as real. When ancient humans were caught in extreme cold without their usual shelter, or when temperatures dropped so severely that even their shelters could not maintain enough warmth, some of them used the carcasses of large animals as emergency survival shelters. A freshly killed mammoth or large animal retains significant body heat for a period after death. The thick fur provides insulation from the outside. The interior of the body, once the organs are removed, creates a protected enclosed space that stays significantly warmer than the air outside. This is not speculation. Documented survival accounts from Arctic explorers in the 19th and 20th centuries describe exactly this practice when caught in extreme conditions without adequate shelter. Indigenous Arctic communities passed this knowledge forward as genuine survival techniques. Ancient humans who developed this practice did not do it by accident. They observed that the interior of a large animal stayed warm long after death. They recognized it as a survival resource, and they used it when nothing else was available. The person who first made that decision was not thinking about how uncomfortable it was. They were thinking about whether they would still be alive in the morning. But surviving the cold was not only about shelter and clothing. There was another threat that killed as many ancient humans in winter as the cold itself, and most people never think about it at all. In -40 temperatures, the human body burns calories at a rate that is genuinely difficult to imagine in modern life. Staying warm is not passive. Your body is constantly burning energy to maintain its internal temperature. In extreme cold, the caloric requirement to stay alive rises dramatically. Ancient humans in Ice Age winters needed significantly more food than they needed in warm months. At exactly the time of year when food was hardest to find, animals that could be hunted had either migrated, gone into hibernation, or become thin and difficult to catch. Plants were buried under snow. Rivers were frozen. The land essentially stopped producing food at the exact moment when the people living on it needed more of it than at any other point in the year. So ancient humans became obsessed with preparation. Not in a casual way. In a life-or-death way, meat was dried and smoked in the warmer months and stored in quantities that could carry the entire group through the coldest period. Animal fat was rendered down and stored separately because fat provided the densest caloric energy available and was specifically what the body needed to generate heat in extreme cold. Researchers studying ancient winter survival found something that surprises most people. The most valuable food in an Ice Age winter was not meat, it was fat. Lean meat alone cannot provide enough calories for a human body maintaining its temperature in -40. Fat was what made the difference between a group that reached spring and one that did not. Ancient humans who understood this stored fat deliberately and specifically. They knew which parts of an animal to prioritize. They knew how to render it into a stable form that would last through the winter. And they knew that the person in the group who managed the food stores carefully was as important to survival as the best hunter. Here is the final threat that -40 winters posed to ancient humans, and it is the one that most people never consider at all. The darkness. In Ice Age winters at high latitudes, usable daylight could shrink to just a few hours a day. That left 15 or 16 hours of complete darkness every night. Hours during which no one could hunt, travel, or do most of the work that survival required. Hours spent inside a small enclosed space with the same small group of people night after night for months. Modern research on isolation and confinement shows that prolonged darkness and restricted movement create serious psychological strain even with modern comforts. For ancient humans without those comforts, the psychological weight of a long winter night was a genuine threat to the group's ability to function. Ancient humans solved this the way they solved most problems, by turning the constraint into something useful. The long dark hours of winter became the time for everything that did not require daylight. Tool repair, clothing maintenance, the carving and crafting of objects that would be needed when the weather broke, and most importantly, They became the time for something that no other species on Earth does in the same way: storytelling. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer communities found that conversations around the fire at night shifted dramatically toward stories, songs, and the passing of knowledge from older to younger members of the group. The darkness created a specific kind of intimacy and attention that daytime activity never produced. The myths, the knowledge of animal behavior, the understanding of the landscape across hundreds of miles, the memory of hard winters survived in the past and how they were managed. All of this was transmitted in the long dark hours of an Ice Age winter around a fire inside a structure built from the bones of mammoths. Winter did not just threaten ancient humans, it built them. Every piece of knowledge that allowed the next generation to survive was forged in exactly these conditions. So here is the full picture of how ancient humans stayed warm in -40-degree cold. Fitted sewn clothing that sealed warmth against the body and matched the performance of modern winter gear. Engineered shelters built from mammoth bones when timber and stone were not available. The use of large animal carcasses as emergency warmth when nothing else was available. Carefully managed food stores built specifically around fat as the primary caloric resource for cold weather survival. And the long, dark nights turned into the classroom where everything the group knew was passed forward to the next generation. None of this was improvised desperation. All of it was accumulated knowledge refined across thousands of years of people surviving winters that should have been impossible and passing forward what worked. The next time the temperature drops and you reach for the thermostat without thinking, remember that somewhere in an Ice Age winter, an ancient human was sitting inside the carcass of a mammoth next to a small fire, waiting for morning, in conditions that would end most modern people within hours. They made it, and so did every generation after them. All the way down to you. If this changed how you think about the cold you complain about every winter, subscribe. And drop a comment telling me which part of ancient winter survival you think you could actually handle. Because honestly, I think we all know the answer.